Have you seen that weird Kickstarter about the new plug-and-play NES controller called the Arcade? It's a plug-and-play game that has all those old unlicensed Bible games from Wisdom Tree on it. Man, this thing's actually pretty cool. They basically stuffed a Nintendo on a chip console inside of an NES-style controller, and I think that's a nice idea for old Nintendo games that are being re-released. I wish someone would make one of these that you could just slip a micro SD card full of ROMs into. Now that'd be a sweet way to play some NES. But this arcade thing is filled with all those old unlicensed Bible games for Nintendo from Wisdom Tree, nicely wrapped up in a reproduction NES controller. When I first saw this, I knew it kinda looked familiar to me. I've collected a few plug-and-plays over the years and thought for sure I had this one already. Well, turns out I actually did have the Wisdom Tree plug-and-play. It's not the same as the new arcade plug-and-play, but it is kinda the same thing. It just leads me to ask myself why it is that Wisdom Tree would release a new plug-and-play, the Arcade, when they already had their games on the biblical Time Voyager. Well, let's get into this and check it out. So the Time Voyager wasn't created by Wisdom Tree, but rather a company called Rockforge, who designed and had it manufactured. On the front of the box they call it the Bible Time Voyager, whereas everywhere else it's called the Biblical Time Voyager. Oops. I obviously bought this unit used, so I'm not sure if I have all the things that came with it in the box, but I think most of it's in here. The Time Voyager comes in a fairly sturdy box, but the graphics on mine are kind of messed up. I think there was tape on it at one point, and it took the printing off when the tape was removed. That's okay though, you can still see what it's supposed to look like. Pretty good design and interesting graphics on the box, though I don't see any sort of copyright to indicate when this thing is from. If I remember correctly, it was sold at Christian bookstores in the early 2000s. So here's a list of the 7 games included on this thing. Bible Adventures, King of Kings, Exodus, Spiritual Warfare, Joshua, Bible Buffet, and Sunday Funday. It's also worth noting that some of these games have 3 games within itself, like sub-games, which brings the count up to a lot of Bible games. Too many? Maybe. Inside the box we have the controller itself. We'll look at that closer here in a second. The AV cables, and which I would assume would be the AC adapter that comes with the unit. Mine didn't have it in the box, so I'm using this universal AC adapter that lets me pull the 9 volts this unit needs. An installation manual, which for some reason says there's 10 games included instead of 7, and it has some instructions on how to set it up using the AV cables or RF cable. An instruction manual. Oh, there's our copyright. Again, there it says 10 games, built-in software times 10. This thing is filled with what looks like photocopies of the manuals from all these old Nintendo games. Kinda weird that the quality's so bad. And finally, the Bible Buffet quiz book. This thing is filled with all the questions for the Bible Buffet game, and you can't really play it properly without it. It's good to have. So back to the controller. We can see it has a nice blue color. The plastic feels soft, but just by looking at it I can tell if this thing were dropped on a hard floor it probably wouldn't survive without some major damage. So I think the design was based on the Dreamcast controller. I've actually seen generic plug-and-play shells like this before, and they're all not very good. On the top of the controller you have the power switch, mono audio and video outputs, and a 9-volt DC power jack. When I saw that power jack, I thought to myself, no way, I don't want that many wires sticking out of this thing. That'll look ridiculous. I'll just use batteries. So I go to the back of the controller to pop in some batteries when I notice that while there are a lot of slots for batteries that are clearly labeled, there aren't actually any terminals that connect the batteries to anything. So that's no good. What's this weird connector? Oh, and while we're in here, we can see that that RF output isn't actually hooked up to anything either. On the front of the controller we have the reset button, B and A buttons, along with the turbo buttons, start and select, a 1 and 2 player switch, a pretty nasty D-pad, and a joystick that's junk. Seriously, when I first bought this thing and brought it home, I realized that the joystick was completely snapped and all floppy loose. I opened up the case to fix the stick, and a whole bunch of broken plastic pieces fell out from inside. I crazy glued the stick back into place, and even still it feels really fragile. I would be shocked if it wasn't a common problem for these sticks to be broken. But enough of this, let's check out the games. Now, this isn't meant to be a review of each game individually. These games have a following, so I'm sure there are reviews out there for each of these if you want to know more. But there's not too many of these games, so let's check them out and take a quick look at each game. Here we have a nice menu showing all of our games. This music makes me want to go to sleep. First up, Sunday Funday. There are actually 3 choices or sub-games in Sunday Funday. First you have Sunday Funday, the actual game, Fishfall, and For Him the Ride. In Sunday Funday, you play as a boy who's late for Sunday school and on his way. You skateboard through this game and have to defeat a ton of enemies along the way. This game is basically a hack of the game Menace Beach by Color Dreams, Wisdom Tree's original company. What they pretty much did was replace the angry tied-up babe, whose clothes slowly rip apart throughout the game, with an angry Sunday school teacher telling you to hurry up and get to class. This is actually a pretty fun game and probably my favorite of the bunch. Next we have Fishfall, where you have to grab the falling fish and chuck them back up to the basket up top. There's really not much to this game and it's not very good, but there is a strange calm that comes over me when I play this one. Almost like meditation. There are different levels and different enemies, but it just takes too long to beat each level. And the last game on Sunday Funday is For Him, a weird thing where you can listen and sing along to some song by a Christian band. This is so weird. Next up is Bible Buffet. This is like an electronic board game style game. This is where you'll need that booklet that comes in the box. There'll be some questions and you'll have to use that to read them. This game is interesting because you spin the wheel and each square is like a level or stage that you play through. I assume this game is the main reason they included a 1 or 2 player toggle on the controller. Now on to Bible Adventure. This is another game with 3 sub-games included. These are Noah's Ark, Baby Moses, and David and Goliath. In Noah's Ark, you gotta run around and grab animals and bring them to the Ark. Once you capture an animal, it gets checked off the list and you move on to find another. This game isn't unplayable, but it just isn't very fun, at least in my opinion. On to Baby Moses. In this game, you have to grab Baby Moses and carry him through the levels. You'll have about 1,000,000 bad guys trying to stop you though. Kinda gets frustrating after a while. Baby Moses, Baby Moses. In David and Goliath, you play as David and go through the levels collecting your sheep and bringing them to safety. This game gets pretty tough and I haven't made it very far into it, but overall it seems just as mediocre as the other 2 games. I've seen these Bible adventure games compared to Super Mario 2, but really, I think that's almost giving it too much credit. Super Mario 2 was fantastic, whereas these Bible adventure games aren't really great, in my opinion of course. The King of Kings has yet another sub-menu of 3 games, The Wisemen, Flight to Egypt, and Jesus in the Temple. The Wisemen is another platformer, where you control a camel that can jump really high and spit stones. There are a lot of obstacles that'll get in your way and take away your life. To get more life, you have to find one of these scrolls and answer a Bible question. In Flight to Egypt, you control a donkey that carries Mary, Joseph, and baby Jesus away from Bethlehem to Egypt to escape Herod's wrath. This game is pretty boring. There isn't much variety and it really gets old fast. In Jesus in the Temple, you play as Joseph, searching for young Jesus, who got lost after they left the feast of the Passover. This game is ridiculously hard to control, and there are a lot of bad guys to push you around. I'm constantly falling down off the bottom of the screen. Spiritual Warfare is next on the list. It's a more popular one of these Bible games, and has heavy influence from Zelda. Very religious, this one. I'd say this would be The Legend of Zelda if it were designed by Ned Flanders. Joshua is a Boulder Dash style game. You basically run around shooting or singing at people, stones, and dirt. At the end of the level, you have to answer the Bible questions. I kinda like this game. It has some good gameplay, and I found it to be kinda fun. In the last game, Exodus, you play as Moses as he leads the Israelites to the Promised Land. This is kind of like the last game, but this time you're shooting out W's for some reason. To finish each level, you have to find 5 question marks, as well as other stuff while avoiding all the enemies. And that's pretty much it. That's all the games. Aside from the wisdom tree, dare I use the word cult following, I don't see too many people buying this, even when it was new. I think the time has passed where this might actually be something that people would buy to teach their kids about Christianity. And that goes with the new arcade too. These games are old and obscure, and this Time Voyager is fragile with poor, cheap build quality. That probably is actually why they released the new arcade, because this thing was terrible. I would only recommend buying this unit if you're really into collecting plug-and-plays, but wouldn't recommend buying this to play through and experience the Bible games. For that, you're probably better off buying the new arcade plug-and-play, using an emulator, or tracking down the expensive original NES games. The Time Voyager is hard to find and not something you'll run into often, even online, but it never usually goes for very much, normally under $20. The rarity of this thing is probably proof that it didn't sell well, and most of them that did sell probably broke and got thrown in the garbage at some point. Well, I find this thing interesting, but that's our look at the Bible Time Voyager. It kinda sucks. Hey, if this video has been something that you think you might have just enjoyed, then please do me the fine, satisfactionary subscriber. For the videos of the Macintosh game, please click to that. And for the videos, stay tuned to more from this channel. Thanks, and have a fun time. Bye.